So, hello sir, this is our reporting for the Module 8 in Life, Works, and Writings of Rizal. Rizal in London, Paris, Brussels, and Madrid. Rizal in London. After visiting the United States, Rizal lived in London from May 1888 to March 1889 to copy, study, and make the annotation of Dr. Antonio de Morga's Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas, or the events in the Philippine Islands, to make his people know the history of their country. He also believed that London was safe for him to carry on his fight against Spanish tyranny in London. He engaged in Filipiniana studies, wrote many articles for La Solidaridad in defense of his people against Spanish critics, composed the famous letter to the young woman of Malolos, carried on his voluminous correspondence with Blumentritt and relatives, and had a romance with Gertrude Becket. In this city, for a short time, he stayed as a guest at the home of Dr. Antonio Maria Regidor, an exile of 1872 and practicing lawyer. By the end of May, he moved to a boarding place, number 37, Chalcote Crescent, Primrose Hill, London. He was a boarder of the Becket family, composed of Mr. Becket, the organist of St. Paul's Cathedral, Mrs. Becket, two sons, and four daughters. The oldest of the Becket sisters was Gertrude, called Getty. Rizal came to know Dr. Reynold Rost, the librarian of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and an authority on Malayan languages and customs. Dr. Rost was impressed with Rizal's manners and called him una perla de hombre, which means a pearl of a man. Why did Rizal chooses to stay in London? First is to improve his knowledge of the English language. Second is to study and annotate the Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas of Antonio de Morga. And last, the third one, which is London was a safe place for him to carry out his fight against Spanish tyranny. So while Rizal is staying at London, there are some bad news coming from his home. First is the persecution of the Filipino patriots who signed the anti-friar petition in 1888. Second, the Calamba agrarian conflict of 1888, in which the tenants, including Rizal's family, were being persecuted by the Dominicans. Third, Manuel T. Hidalgo, which is the husband of his sister Saturnina, was exiled to Bohol. Fourth is Mariano Herbosa, also a husband of his sister Lucia, was denied of Christian burial because of the malicious rumor that he had not confessed since their marriage. And last, Laureano Viado, a medical student at UST and a friend of him, was imprisoned because of owning a copy of Noli Me Tangere. So if there is the bad news, there are also good news coming from his home while staying in London. First is Reverend Vicente Garcia defended the Noli Me Tangere against the attack of the friars. Next is he heard this news from Mariano Ponce. And last, on January 7, 1891, Rizal wrote to Father Garcia expressing his gratitude. So, writings in London. In London, he annotated Morga's work. He also wrote articles for the Solidaridad. He also wrote La Visión de Fray Rodriguez, where he demonstrated his profound knowledge of religion and his style in satire. The letter of the young woman of Malolos was written in London. This was made through the request of Marcelo H. del Pilar to praise the young woman of Malolos for their courage and determined effort to establish a school where they could learn Spanish. So what are the main points of this letter? These were: number one, a Filipino mother should teach her children love of God, fatherland, and mankind. Next, the Filipino mother should be glad, like the Spartan mother, to offer their sons in the defense of her fatherland. Third, a Filipino woman should know how to preserve her dignity and honor. Fourth, a Filipino woman should educate herself aside from retaining her good racial virtues. And last, fifth, faith is not merely reciting long prayers and wearing religious pictures, but rather it is living the real Christian way with good morals and good manners. Dr. Ross, the editor of Trubner's Record, the journal devoted to Asian studies, requested Rizal to contribute some articles which he readily accepted. These were number 1, Specimens of Tagal Folklore, which was established in the journal in May 1889, and second, 2 Eastern Fables, published in 1889. The first article consisted of Filipino proverbs, and the second one was comparative study of Philippine and Japanese folklore.
Rizal and La Solidaridad. On January 12, 1889, Rizal with some Filipinos and their Spanish friend in Madrid organized a society, Association Hispano-Filipina or the Spanish-Filipino Association. The primary objective was to work for the needed reforms which the propaganda movement has initiated and continued to carry on. Don Miguel Moraita, a Spanish professor, was elected president, General Felipe de Lascone as the vice president, and the Dr. Dominador Gomez was elected secretary. The need for an organ of the propaganda to neutralize the false, malicious, and defamatory articles designed to stain to the reputation of the Filipino written by the Spanish critics and mercenaries was felt by the Filipinos in Spain too consequently led to the founding of La Solidaridad. Graciano Lopez Hasiana founded the patriotic newspaper La Solidaridad on February 18, 1589 in Barcelona where Marcelo H. del Pilar became the editor. Objectives of La Solidaridad: to establish reform for our country, to show the unfortunate condition in the Philippines committed by the Spaniards, to promote free and progressive ideas, and to implement the patriotic vision of the Filipino. First article in La Solidaridad, Los Agricultores Filipinos or the Filipino Farmers. It was published on March 25, 1889, 6 days after he left London from Paris. Rizal received news on Fray Rodriguez' attack on his No Limit Tangere. He wrote a pamphlet entitled The Vision del Fray Rodriguez, which was published in Barcelona under his pen name Dimas Alang. Rizal became the leader of Filipino in Europe by the anonymous vote of all members. Rizal was chosen to be the president of the society called Association La Solidaridad. Rizal had a romantic interlude with the oldest of the Beckett sisters, Gertrude. Rizal affectionately called her Getty, and she fondly called him Pet, Peteti. Adios London. Rizal was forced to leave London because Gertrude's love for him has become serious. He could not take advantage of her affection, and she would not be happy because Rizal was still in love with Leonor Rivera. He decided to move to Paris so she would forget about him. On March 1989, Rizal departed for Paris. He was sad he crossed the English Cold, for he had made beautiful memories in London. Before leaving London, Rizal finished 4 sculptural works: Prometheus Bound, The Triumph of Death over Life, The Triumph of Science of Death, and the composite carving of the Beckett sister. Rizal in Paris in March 1889. It was a difficult of visitors like Rizal to find a living in Paris. The International Exposition of 1889 has attracted thousands of tourists, so that hotel accommodation were taken. So he decided to live for a short while his friend Valentin Ventura in a boarding house where is published his annotated edition of Morga's book. Held in Paris, France, from May 6 to October 31, 1889, the fair attracted exhibits from Europe, South America, United States, and French colonies. Yes, yet it was a celebration of French achievement on the continental of the French Revolution. Because of 1,000 tourists, almost all hotel accommodation were taken in the exposition. There was an international art competition where Felix Hidalgo won the third prize, Pardo de Tavera, Juan Luna won the second prize, and unfortunately, Rizal got nothing. He spent his time in Bibliothèque Nationale, reading and checking up with his historical annotation of Morag's book. He visited his friends like Busted family, Luna family, Taveras family, etc. He also organized societies with his fellow Filipinos. Kidlat Club, founded on March 1989, the purpose of this club is to enjoy their journey in the exposition Kidlat because this was a temporary. The member of the club was Antonio Luna, Juan Luna, Gregorio Aguilera, Fernando Canon Lauro, Di Mayuga, Julio Ilorente, Guillermo Puato, and Baldomero Rojas. Indios Bravos. The purpose of this club was to stand and not to be ashamed of being called Indios. The member of this club as Antonio and Juan, Gregorio Aguilera, Fernando Canon, Lauro Di Mayuga, Julio Ilorente, Guillermo Puato, Baldomero Rojas. RDLM or Redencio de los Malayos. The purpose of this was to propagate a useful knowledge in any form in the Philippines, the redemption of Malayan race. They do not know each other as well as we do not know them. It is still a mystery. An annotated edition of Morris books. It was published, printed, and proved by the Garnier Ferreres Hermanos. July to December 1889, Prof. Blumentritt wrote its prologue, and it is disproved the Spanish people who claimed that the Filipinos were of all low mentality. Although this was an outstanding achievement of Rizal, there were still some errors. Commits the error in appraising the history and the past of the light and the present standards. Rizal attacks of the church unfair and unjustified because of the abuses should not be constructed to mean Catholic is bad. Rizal and the Busted Sisters. Rizal had another love affair in Paris. This it was an Adelina Busted, the younger sister of Nelly. He liked her instead of athletic Nelly because she was quiet, refined, and dignified woman. On the other hand, Nelly was attracted to Antonio Luna, and dashing of violent passion. Rizal and Luna used to visit Busted family in the Paris. In the course of their frequent visits of the Busted home, Nelly was infatuated with Rizal because of his wit, talent, and fine manners. But because he loved Adelina, he did not even show any sign of affection for Nelly. Luna became jealous because Nelly was apparently in love with Rizal. Luna thought all the while that Rizal was deliberately alienating Nelly's affection for him To maintain their friendship, he told Luna that no feeling for Nelly. Luna challenged him to do well, but fortunately, their friend settled the matter amicably. The saddest part of Rizal was the news of impending marriage and Leonor Cervera, his girlfriend for 11 years, to Mr. Charles Henry C. Keeping, an English engineer employed in the construction of the Manila-Dagupan Railway. To divert his grieving moment about Leonor Rivera's coming marriage, he visited the Busted family in the Beatriz French Rivera, and the ideal spot for romance. The contemplated offering Adelina a marriage proposal, his marriage proposal did not prosper for the three reasons. First is that Adelina doubted his love for her because she knew about his broken engagement with Leonor Rivera. Rizal refused to accept the condition that he become a Protestant like her. Adelina's mother opposed the match because Rizal was not rich enough to support the family style. Despite his unsuccessful marital plan, Rizal remained a good friend with the wealthy Bested family.
Rizal in Brussels. Rizal left Paris for Brussels, the capital of Belgium, on January 28, 1890. Two reasons impelled him to leave Paris. First, the cost of living in Paris was very high due to the International Exposition. Second, the bustling social life of the city hampered his literary works, especially the writings of his second novel, El Filibusterismo. He moved to Brussels and lived in a modest boarding house at number 38, Rue Philippe Champagne, with his friend Jose Alberto. Being a surgeon, he spent part of his time in the medical clinic for medical practice. Because of the clinical fees he received from the patients, there was no difficulty meeting the essentials he needed in Brussels. He also wrote articles for La Solidaridad and a letter for his family and friends. He also spent his remaining time doing gymnastics in the gymnasium, target practice and fencing at the armory. Rizal criticizes Madrid Filipinos for gambling on May 28, 1890. Rizal wrote to Marcelo H. del Pilar to remind the Filipinos in Madrid that they went to Europe to work for their fatherland's freedom and not to gamble. Through gambling, they are showing that the Filipinos are not worthy of freedom but slavery. They should spend their time doing something noble and generous because the youth is noble and generous. The gambling Filipinos in Madrid became very angry when they learned of Rizal's moralizing, that they called him Papa or Pope instead of Pepe.
Persistent of death. Rizal had a bad dream during and the night of Brussels. Because he always thinking of his unhappy family in Calamba, he feared that he would not live long life. He was not afraid to die, but he wanted to finish his second novel. Because he went to his grave, he wrote to Image del Pilar that he had an unusual feeling that he would not live long, and he would not reach 30 years of age. He also dreamed that his brother, friends, and relatives were dead. He said for me that the reality of such a dream was very remote because my mind and my body are healthy. If any time this misfortune was come, my only wish was to may finish my El Filibusterismo because I believe nobody could continue.
Rizal in Madrid. Madrid, the capital of Spain, is one of the pleasant cities in the world because of its people and culture. Upon arrival in this city, Rizal tried to exhaust all available legal means and remedies to seek justice for his family and the tenant farmer in the Calamba, but justice seemed elusive, the various disappointment and frustrations. The belief the betrayal his family in the betrayal of a woman whom he loved and deeply for a long time seemed a heavy cross in his shoulders that seemed unbearable to carry. Because of the compounded problem he had to bear, he almost engaged in duels, one with Antonio Luna and other with Wenceslao Renata. Rizal looked forward with optimism toward continuing his mission and lofty ideal with determined effort, fortitude, and tenacity of spirit, and relentlessly continued to fight for his oppressed people. All the attempt and the effort accorded by his friend toward the resolution for his problem and that time just turned out to be a exercise in futility.
Duel with Antonio Luna and Wenceslao Retana. Luna was blaming Rizal for his failure to win her, Nelly, in a fit of jealousy. Luna uttered unsavory remarks about Nelly. The Filipinos were shocked by these untimely moments. They tried to pacify the two that such a duel would not do any good and effect damage their cause in Spain. When Luna became sober and calm, he realized that the incident should not have happened. So he apologized for his remarks he made, which were unbecoming of a man. Rizal readily accepted his apology and the two became friends again. Rizal, by nature, is a principled man and he optimized a virtue of righteousness and prudence. He is cool and not easily disturbed. However, when the honor of his family, friends, and women, and the Filipinos were challenged by malicious and unfounded accusations, he would never hesitate to defend them even at the cost of his life. Wenceslao Retana, a talented Spanish scholar and an accomplished writer, used to contribute articles in an anti-Filipino newspaper in Madrid. One of his articles that became into print in La Ecopa, a widely circulated newspaper in Madrid at that time, asserted that the relatives and friends of Rizal had not paid their annual rents for the land they titled, so the Dominicans ejected them. Rizal would not take an insult sitting down, so he challenged Retana to a duel. Retana did not accept the challenge. For Rizal, the only rational thing for Retana to do was publish a retraction and an apology in the same newspaper for the articles he wrote, which he did. The incident made by Retana developed a great admiration for Rizal. Years after, he wrote the first full-length biography of the greatest Filipino hero whose talents he recognized and whose martyrdom is glorified.